China is the world's manufacturing hub. They produce the world's largest share of consumer goods, electronics, machinery, and industrial components. But there's a problem that some people have been wondering about China's actual potential, and it's the fact that, while it produces much of the world's supplies, some question whether they can actually survive alone. Are they capable enough to actually survive alone? Or rather, survive without the United States, which is considered China's biggest trading partner? Well, to understand this, it is important for us to understand where China excels and where China relies on the United States and the rest of the world. Let's first start to understand this by taking a look at China's trade balance by sector. What this basically tells us is how much China exports and imports across different industries, giving us a clearer picture of where it holds a competitive advantage and where it remains dependent on foreign suppliers. Here's a graph for some of China's trade balance by sector. Here you can see that for 2023, the trade balance of China is massive, reaching over $300 billion. That is no small figure, and it shows that China in these sectors isn't really dependent on foreign suppliers. In contrast, it is foreign nations that are dependent on China for these. Here you can see that China excels in advanced materials, renewable energy, marine engineering, agriculture, and rail. These sectors are where China is leading in. This is even much known when we talk about renewable energy. China is a leader in renewable energy technology. For instance, let's graph out the market share of China in key renewable energy sectors. Here you can see China leads in polysilicon, wafers, cells, and modules. Each of these components are crucial in the production of solar panels, which are the backbone of solar energy generation worldwide. And just like renewable energy, China dominates a lot in the sectors we just mentioned. So, China doesn't really need any foreign nations for these sectors, right? They have enough to supply the world, so they wouldn't really need any more imports. Indeed, that is right. But here is where China may lack, and it's the fact that we haven't really shown the sectors where China's trade balance is negative. Here's an updated graph on the trade balance by sector of China, but instead of the industries where it has a trade surplus with the rest of the world, we show the trade deficits it has with the world. Here, you can see that China has a deficit, a massive deficit, especially in information technology. It has smaller deficits in medical technology and aerospace, but information technology takes the big lead here. So, why is China's information technology a big deficit? Does this already mean that China is not self-sufficient when it comes to this sector? Well, the reason for this big deficit, as some of you may already know, is because of China's reliance on foreign semiconductor technology. Despite its ambitions to achieve technological self-sufficiency, China still heavily depends on semiconductor imports from countries like the United States, Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan. Semiconductors, or chips, are the backbone of modern electronics, powering everything from smartphones and computers to military equipment and artificial intelligence systems. Here's a graph on the top 10 destinations for US semiconductor exports by country. What this graph tells us is how much semiconductors are being sold or exported from the United States. Here, you can see that the second leading nation is no other than China. In fact, if you even add China with Hong Kong, they would be the first, above Mexico. What this basically shows is how much China imports semiconductors from the United States. These semiconductors, as we just mentioned, are part of the information technology sector, and it is where China is reliant on the world. So, is this a problem for China? Well, for the most part, the country can survive without these American, Taiwanese, and Korean-made semiconductors. China has its own semiconductor industry and can produce their own semiconductors. But the problem isn't about semiconductors. It's more on advanced semiconductors. China doesn't really import semiconductors that they make, such as lower-end or mature node semiconductors. These are chips that are essential for everyday electronics, industrial applications, and even automotive manufacturing. But they are not the most advanced chips needed for artificial intelligence, high-performance computing, or 5G technology. China's domestic semiconductor industry, led by companies like SMIC, Semiconductor Manufacturing International Corporation, and Hua Hong Semiconductor, has made significant progress in producing these mature node chips. However, when it comes to cutting-edge, high-performance semiconductors, such as those below the 10-nanometer process, China remains heavily dependent on foreign suppliers. That is where China lags behind. So, to put the entire video in simplicity, of course, China can survive in this key industry. But when it comes to international competition in advanced technology that requires advanced semiconductors, China can't really survive without the imports. And this, unfortunately, extends to most of China's dominance in other sectors. For instance, in renewable energy, which is an industry where China dominates, the country still relies on foreign technology and raw materials for some of its most critical components. While China leads in solar panel production, the advanced machinery used to manufacture high-efficiency solar cells often comes from Western nations, particularly the United States, Germany, and Japan. Similarly, in the wind energy sector, China produces more turbines than any other country, but many of the high-performance materials required, such as rare earth magnets, still depend on imports. Now, secondly, beyond information technology, China is also reliant on aerospace and medical technology. Medical technology may require deeper understanding, so we'll stick with aerospace. Aerospace is easy to understand. Many people know that European and American companies are leaders in aerospace. For instance, here's a graph of some of the largest aerospace companies by market capitalization. Here you can see that there isn't really a Chinese company on the list. These are Western companies. That is a given, since they truly lead when we talk about the best aerospace technology, manufacturing, and innovation. Companies like Boeing, Airbus, Lockheed Martin, and Northrop Grumman dominate the industry, producing advanced commercial aircraft, fighter jets, satellites, and space exploration technology. China, despite its industrial strength in many sectors, has yet to establish itself as a serious competitor in this space. So, in both aerospace and information technology, China does need the Western world. But then again, there's actually good news that showcases where China has actually been replacing its imports with domestic manufacturing. Here's a graph on the ratio of imports to industrial production, comparing China to the United States. What this data is about is how much of each country's industrial production relies on imported inputs. In other words, it shows the degree to which China and the United States depend on foreign goods to sustain their manufacturing industries. A higher ratio suggests greater reliance on imports, while a lower ratio indicates stronger domestic production capabilities. Here, you can see that in previous years, China's ratio was higher than the United States. But in later years, China's dependence on imports has decreased, replacing them with their own industrial production. And you can also see how the United States was not really reliant on imports in previous years, but recently, the country is now becoming more reliant on the world. Hence, what this basically shows is that China is actively reducing its reliance on foreign imports by developing its own industrial capabilities, while the United States is experiencing an opposite trend, becoming more dependent on global supply chains for key goods. This shift highlights China's progress in self-sufficiency and America's growing reliance on outsourced manufacturing and foreign inputs. So, if the trend continues like this, then it is likely that China can become self-sufficient, at least in terms of some key industries. But the country as a whole, it may be unlikely for China to become fully self-sufficient. There's just too many obstacles that China faces. In agriculture, for instance, China is also a major importer of food. This is a given because China is constrained by a lack of arable land and water. But then again, this story isn't just applied to China. It is for the rest of the world. But anyway, do let us know what you think. Thanks for watching.